Welcome to Subject to Change, a sustainability podcast.
So Bryan, welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We tend to just kind of dive right in.
Bryan starts with the Ministry for the Future.
Kim Stanley Robinson's terrific science fiction novel, Ministry for the Future. There's actually a UN organization. We don't have that. We have multiple movements, but they're very, very thin. And
the UN SDGs come close to identifying they do identify the things we should be paying attention to, but there's no implementation of tactics. There's no control, no guidance, no enforcement per se. It's voluntary and it's encouraging.
Well, the SDGs are a framework of a framework. They have no timeline, as you say. They have no enforcement.
Think differently about economics.
For higher education, I keep coming back to this because this is something that we can study in our academic research. It's something we can teach in our teaching, and maybe intervene in to some degree. I look at things like Raworth's book on donut economics. Steady state economics. Do you think there's the push for degrowth and the circular economy? I was talking to Kim Stanley Robinson. He says what we need to do is academics need to figure out how to come up with a better way of assessing enterprises besides profit and loss.
We talked about how the happiness index is a much more honest, honest and moral way of deciding if a country is being successful than the GDP, because GDP goes up whenever there's a war. Whenever there's a crisis, we're basing our success on how chaotic things can be.
Check out the Culture series.
Banks was a Scots writer who published something like a novel every 30 seconds. I mean, just an extraordinarily prolific man. Died a few years ago, and he's got a huge reputation now, in part because the culture. I mean, all of his books are interesting, but the Culture series is about a far future, galaxy-spanning utopia, which simply works.
Right.
And the challenge for every book is to actually have it be interesting, because utopias are not that great for stories.
Right. There needs to be a conflict and a resolution in order for there to be a story arc, right?
Yeah. But I look to that.
I don't actually agree with that, but.
Well, in terms of literature, at least in terms of literary market, we know that right now we're crazy for dystopias, but a lot of utopias are basically travelers' guides, and
it's so funny. I just have to put this plug in for another set of books, which is it's outside the realm of science fiction. It's really almost like a fantasy magic kind of. And what I've always loved about this series of books, and it's written by Deborah Geary, is that there are no bad guys and there's no big conflict, but all of the books are written about a community that's trying to, and individuals are trying to figure out their own strength and their own purpose within that community. So there's a lot of vibrancy and a lot of development and a lot of growth and a lot of interchange, but there's no bad guy. There's no evilness.
Is the Modern Witch series?
Yes. And
that's
it's very
what it's
light
called,
reading.
Modern Witch series.
There are 13 books and they line up in different ways. There's the Modern Witch series, and then there's some other little series that go in that. But that universe that she's created it's just kind of brilliant. There aren't any bad guys. There are just people trying to figure out their own shit.
So just half an hour ago, I was in an online book club and people were talking about Kim Stanley Robinson's Ministry of the Future. And there was an argument about, does the novel have an antagonist? And the conclusion was really no, there wasn't a villain.
Yeah.
And that was, so I'm glad to see, Jody, that somebody else has really run with this idea. I think,
I don't even know if it was intentional, but I find it very, very, I won't say calming, but very friendly. I feel very safe when I'm reading the books because it helps me realize that each and every one of us is a work in progress. And maybe that's one of the facets that can be part of a future view, is that, and it's kind of like redefining the term growth. Maybe growth isn't outward, maybe growth is inward. So these books always speak to me in what do I need to develop in me to be fitting into this society in a really fulfilling way.
I love that idea as part of a positive image of the future. And without it, I don't think you can really have a positive image of the future.
And don't forget how gaming can change how our minds work.
The only revitalization, the only real change I've seen in the last 20 years is a change in how board games are played.
Am I seeing Catan back there?
Yeah. All of the games that you build
Yes.
as you play, or they're
Yeah.
collaborative, but they're also somebody wins, and it's like an entire, like, there are very few industries that I can name that have had a radical change. The board game industry is one, and you know what? I'm going to make this my homework assignment. What other industry has had a radical change? Architecture certainly hasn't yet had a radical change.
No, but board games gaming in general. I mean, you think computer games and board games both are enormous sources of creativity. I keep terrifying my wife by bringing back new board games, and she's like, "Stop!"
We've got a lot.
Oh, I can't show you mine. I'm not, but you think about just, Euro games, and you think about all the breakout, the rethinking of design, of having more women designers.
Oh God, yeah.
And all of this is terrific. And then computer games is actually almost too big to follow because you have such a huge, crazy diversity of stuff.
I've lost traction there, but that's okay. I'm okay with that. I can't
Jody,
explore all of that fantastic stuff.
Let's talk about board games later. I'd love to run a couple of ideas past you.
I want to do a climate module for Catan that I've sort of almost done.
Now, have you played the game CO2?
No.
I've been looking for the new edition of it. I haven't played it yet, but it's a historical game starting in the 70s, I think. Trying to give you the chance of addressing climate.
This has been some special content diving deep into books with Bryan Alexander, Futurist.
Thank you.
I'd like to come back, say this winter or next year.
Yeah, I'll get it on the books. I'll
great.
email you next week.
Please do. Please do.